Well, hello again, my friends and fellow invisibles, if you are one. Um, yeah, had a great success with the last lecture I did on the church at Rochester, talking about this great dragon that was in there. And I thought I'd follow up on that because I see that what's happening in our world right now is really, really frightening, I think, for a lot of us. We are seeing more overtly processes that have actually been going on secretly behind the scenes for decades. But now it's all coming out and it's in your face, as they say. I'm not going to go into the politics of what's happening in Britain at the moment. It's really quite scary. And this is not a political channel as such. I'm concerned with our higher development and our possibilities, particularly Christianity. But as you know, my work goes wider than that because I think the what we're taught as Christianity today is not necessarily all that it was in the past, and there are things which have been forgotten or things which are only now being revealed, and we need to deal with those as well. But anyway, this lecture is called Satan Attacks the Churches, and I think you're going to like it. It's a good one. Now then, I'm going to be reading off the screen here at times because I've prepared this quite carefully and there's a lot to be said. So excuse me if I'm sometimes looking at a screen and not at the camera. I'll try to look to you as much as I can, but I also have to do this. Now then, we are living at the time of the apocalypse or revelation described by the Apostle John in the last book of the Bible. In this lecture, I'm going to show you certain signs that indicate that this is indeed the time spoken of by John. Now, for those of you who know my work, you probably remember that I took a party of people to Egypt and Israel back in the year 2000 because there were certain signs in the sky in June of that year at the summer solstice that I wanted us to witness because I saw a tie-up between them and the start of the book of Revelation. Now, I've done other programs on that, so I'm not going to go into that today. But this picture here that you're looking at was painted for me by a friend of mine called Bengt Alfredsson, a Swedish friend who's passed on now. But it shows what I call the opening of the Stargate on that particular day. And it's taken, the theme is taken from the start of the book of Revelation. And I've gone into that in great detail. So this is not something I've been only just come across, only just thought, oh, I'll make a little lecture on the book of Revelation to get a few hits on YouTube. It's not like that at all. I've been involved with this for decades. And I'm seeing more and more how this is unfolding in our own times. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. Now, the Apocalypse is the most difficult book to understand in the whole Bible. It describes the events at the end of the age when there would be a terrifying happenings prior to the return of Jesus Christ. From John's perspective, this was far in the future. He was living back in the 1st century AD. It's way in the future for him. It's reality is today for us. What John witnesses are symbolic portrayals in the form of archetypal images. In many ways, John's revelation is a continuation of the visions received by the prophet Daniel, given some 600 years earlier during the Babylonian captivity. Now again, I've done 3 programs on the book of Daniel. You can see, if you go on my channel and have a look there, you'll find them there. You should really watch those, and then I've got 26 or 27 lectures on the book of Revelation itself. So if you're interested in this subject, I would do that in that order. But I'm not going to go into that detail with this lecture. We're going to be looking at signs which are around us all now. And we're seeing them today telling us, yeah, wake up, this is the time. You've got to take interest. You've got to, take control of your situation. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side at the times that's being talked about. Now then, John warns his readers that what he is describing will not be understood until the time of the end. He also cautions that the book must be preserved unchanged until then. Yeah, he says, don't change as much as a jot or title. A jot is a point, and a title is crossing your T's. So what he sees are images of the beasts representing the rise and fall of empires. That goes back to the book of Daniel, as I was saying. He also sees Satan in the form of a seven-headed red dragon. Dragon imagery again. What is extraordinary is that without hindsight and knowing the world as it is now, these images do make sense in our day, if not in his. So he didn't know what he's talking about. A lot of the time he was just trying to interpret what he was seeing, in the terms of the times in which he lived. And there were no cars, there's no aeroplanes, there's no anything, no telephones, no smartphones, nothing. Just sheep and goats and donkeys, people living in what we would regard as very primitive conditions. But to them, that was normal. The apocalypse was written for our generation, not his. That's very important to realise. So we are in the position now to understand it much better than he was, because we know what's going on now. In the light of this, I'm going to make some bold statements revealing how we can better understand the strange events of our own time when understood from the perspective of John's revelation. For those who want to know more about the revelation, I've recorded 27 videos on the subject alone, most of them about an hour long. In these I take a deep dive into the complex symbolism of the book. You'll find these videos available for free on my YouTube channel at Adrian Gilbert 1. So if you're on YouTube, you know the at thing. Otherwise it's www.youtube.com/ I can't remember that last bit. And I'll put it in here. You'll see it. The relevant text we'll look at is chapter 12, which describes Satan as a dragon. So I'm going to go to chapter 12 and take you through that, but we'll do that a bit later. In my last video, I talked about my horror at the way Rochester Cathedral, the second cathedral church in Kent to have been founded by St. Augustine himself in AD 604. So St. Augustine came to Kent in 597 at the invitation of the king. Kent was a separate kingdom at that time, an Anglo-Saxon kingdom. In fact, it was the first Anglo-Saxon kingdom, founded by Hengist of Horsa. Remember then? Hengist's descendant was King Ethelbert of Kent, and his wife was a Christian. So he, at her instigation presumably, invited St. Augustine to come over to Kent and teach him about the Christian religion. And Augustine came. He founded the first church in Canterbury, and the second church was here in Rochester. So it's a very, very old foundation, certainly from the point of view of England. There are other older ones actually in Wales, if you go there. But you have to understand that the Anglo-Saxons, when they came to England, they were pagans. And it took a while before they started getting converted. And this was the first place that happened. So this is a very important church, Rochester Cathedral. This year the cathedral has been celebrating the 900th anniversary since a book called the Textus Rafensis, which is handwritten by the monks of what was then an abbey of Rochester, was published. So the monks wrote this book. You know, imagine there's longhand, you know, long before the printing press was invented. And that book still exists today. It's fantastic. They had it in the cathedral, you can see it, in the illuminated manuscripts. For what reasons? For reasons which didn't make sense to me, the symbol or emblem chosen for this celebration, that's the celebration of the 900th anniversary of the book, was a cartoon dragon. And you can see kind of this little image they had downstairs, a sort of dragon, a children's dragon thing holding an illuminated sign. So I thought that was a bit odd, but you know, maybe, you know, people like illuminated manuscripts. But I was in for much more surprise as I progressed around the cathedral. I discovered that the custodians of the cathedral had also chosen to suspend a giant art installation dragon in the nave. Now, the nave of a church is the really big part of it, whereas usually there's a load of benches for you to sit on, but they've taken them all out in Rochester, and they seem to be using this space for kind of art or installations of one sort or another. And I was really horrified to see this dragon hanging there. So they could have chosen almost anything else from the book. For example, they're the earliest law codes of England recorded in there that we have printed. Well, not printed, written. They didn't make any mention of that, except in passing. Oh, yes, some laws in there, oldest in England. Well, I'd like to have heard more about that. But there was nothing there to talk about that, just this dirty great big dragon all the way down the nave. And I thought, that's a very odd, peculiar symbol. It seemed very satanic, to be honest with you. So I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to all the staff and helpers who made and erected this clearly satanic symbol. I very much doubt if any of them are active Satanists, and I'm sure they did not intend to give offence to either fellow Christians or to God. Yeah, I make that proviso. I'm not blaming the people who made this thing, and I know that the Kent Organisation for the Blind was involved in this. Not everyone who's a member is blind. They might be just partially blind, but they could do some sewing work or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. They were enjoying themselves and they were doing that and doing creative stuff. But you do have to wonder about the underlying symbol that's being put there. And why was that done? So I've written here, however, the dragon is what it is, a symbol that in the Bible, and especially in the book of Revelation, symbolizes Satan, which is to say the devil. Now, there is a Bishop of Rochester, he's a gentleman, I haven't met him, but in my opinion, the blame for this insult to Christians, it is an insult to Christians, lies with the man at the top, his boss, the boss of the Bishop of Rochester, the Archbishop of Canterbury. So understand that Rochester, although it's a diocese, it's a sub-diocese of the Archdiocese of Canterbury. So the top man is the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the top prelate in the Church of England. You know that in the Church of England, the monarch is now King Charles III, is the head of the Church of England. The real head, of course, is Jesus Christ, but the one who's overseeing and taking care of the church, you could say, called one of his titles, the Defender of the Faith, is the king. But the top prelate is this Archbishop. So today the post is filled by Justin Welby, that's his name. I'm not an Anglican myself, so I'll leave it to others to assess whether he should be in this post. So I'm not going to discuss him anymore. You can find out about him, quite a controversial figure, but it's not my business, I'm not an Anglican. All that I can say is that he does not seem to understand the symbolic meaning of the dragon. I mean, I'm sure almost any archbishop in the past would have not allowed a big dragon to be hung in the church I'm quite sure of it. Well, maybe one or two of the most recent ones, they're all a bit, But, going back to John Fisher, the martyr, who was Bishop of Rochester, he would not have allowed it. Thomas of Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was murdered in his own cathedral, he would certainly not have allowed it. And all the other bishops and archbishops, they would not have allowed this, but it's happened in our day. So I think that's quite significant. For throughout the Bible, the dragon is a symbol representing Satan. To celebrate and even venerate the dragon so openly is surely wrong. So that's what I'm going to say, and I'm not going to say more on that than that. But what I can see, under this Archbishop, the C of E, that's the Church of England, has gone off the rails. Though placing a helter-skelter in the nave of Norwich Cathedral was symbolic of this. I talked about that in the last lecture as well. This is emblematic of the game Snakes and Ladders. I'm sure you played Snakes and Ladders as a child. You have a board and you throw a dice, and you move your counter along, and you might land on a ladder and it takes you up, but you might land on the head of a snake and it takes you back down. Well, this is a sort of three-dimensional Snakes and Ladders. Inside the little tower, you have a staircase, and you walk up the stairs and go up to the top, and then you come out, and then you can go on, put a mat on there, and you slide down and go. Now, quite big ones of these you can go on outside, but putting one of those in the nave of a church, I felt was totally wrong. It's a fairground thing. It's not a thing to put in the church. If nothing else, it showed a crass misunderstanding of the role of the nave as the boat for helping fish to learn to live a spiritual life. And I'm going to do a lecture for the college on that subject, but in brief, the nave, the word nave for this part of the church comes from a Latin word, navis, which means a boat. And they'll tell you, well, it's because they use the same kind of carpentry to build the roof as they do when making ships or boats. Well, that's all very well, but that's true of all the other roofs in the cathedral. You don't call the whole thing a nave. It's a nave because it represents the boat that the fishermen, fishers of men, fishers of souls in the Bible, they're told St. Peter was a fisherman, and so were many of the other apostles, including John, Andrew, James. These were fishermen from Capernaum or Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus first met them where they were out fishing. And later he told them, I'll make you fishers of men. So the nave represents the boat where they're going to land the fish. And the fish are souls who are lost out there in the world. They're going to bring them into the boat like a lifeboat. The lifeboat is going to, the church is going to take them to heaven. That's what the imagery is really all about. Now, the Church of England is not alone in flirting with dragon serpentine symbolism. The Catholic Church too is guilty of bringing this imagery into its heart. In the Vatican, the Pope Paul VI conference hall looks like the head of a serpent. Now, Pope Paul VI was Pope, I think, in the 1970s, shortly after they'd had the Vatican Council. And he had this big conference hall built. It can hold 6,000 people, and the Pope can sort of give them an audience, a sermon, you might say. Probably has it written down, probably has microphones. But that's where he holds audiences, big audiences. Why did they build it to look like a serpent? So it looks like the head of a serpent. You've got windows that look like the eyes of a serpent. This sort of roof looks like the scales on the top of the head. And it's got a mouth and two fangs going down. Look at it. It looks exactly like a serpent. And you wonder, what the heck, were they blind? Or is this intentional? If so, why? It's a mystery to me, and I think it's a mystery to most people. And there can be no mistaking that the interior of this building is intended to represent a poisonous snake. The question is why? And it gets worse. When giving the audiences, the Pope sits between the fangs. You can see those pillars there. Those are the fangs, seen from a distance. Sits between the fangs and in front of a sculpture supposedly of the risen Christ. You can see it there behind him. You can see it. He's very small, isn't he, compared with the size of this room? It's absolutely enormous, isn't it? And there's this great big figure rising out of what? I don't know. It looks like an atomic explosion or something. Rising up there. That supposedly is Jesus Christ, but it doesn't look like him. It's a horrible looking figure. In actuality, the imagery is demonic. It implies that Jesus is emerging from the serpent. That's what it says to me. It implies that he is the voice of Satan and not the Son of God. I mean, I'm shocked by that. Even if I've got it wrong, even if they say, well, it shows he's conquering the serpent. Well, it's a very dubious image to use, ambivalent at best. And I can't think why they've done this. Why haven't they put a proper risen Christ in there or something instead of this weird sort of modern art thing that looks horrible? But that's what people seem to be doing these days. And this is right in the Vatican, in the heart of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to take you on a slightly different direction now, and we're going to talk about the devil and Satan. I'm sure this is becoming a bit of a theme with this one, isn't it? But I'm going to talk to you about the Mephistophelian Pact. Now, let me explain. You've probably heard the story of Mephistopheles, or Mephistopheles, or however you pronounce it. He's a sort of devil, and he goes around trying to buy souls from people. He wants to take your soul to hell. And the story goes that Dr. Faustus was a real person in Germany, a very clever scientist, but he wanted to know more. He was not content with what he already knew, and he was also lacking a love life. So he turned to magic to, take into that extra bit. He got into the occult, as you would say, and sure enough, he called out spirits, and this guy Mephistopheles appears to him, and Mephistopheles promises him everything: wealth, love, admiration, and even a long life. But first he has to sign a blood contract, and this binds Faust to give up his soul to Mephistopheles after death. Now, I think this is happening a lot these days, not in these bald, churchy type tones, but people do sell themselves to the devil. They say, I really, really, really want wealth. I'll do anything for it. Or I really, really, really want to be able to have sex with all those beautiful women in Hollywood. Or I want to have a long, long life. I don't mind if you give me the blood of babies. This is, I know I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but people do make, unconsciously perhaps at first, but later consciously, pacts with the devil. And once they've signed one of these contracts, they made their soul, they probably don't believe they have a soul. This is the thing. If you don't believe you've got a soul, if you think, oh, I'm just this body, that's all there is, and a brain here, probably going to get Alzheimer's when I get old, but for now, I want to enjoy myself while I can. Eat, drink, and be merry while you can, because tomorrow, well, you're going to probably have, be Alzheimer's in an old people's home, or you kick the bucket and you're gone. You're just back to the worms. That's probably how they think. So they think, well, I'll do anything. I'll do anything to be rich. I'll do anything to have a good life. I want to be famous. I want to be powerful. I want to have political power to control other people's lives. I'll get off on that. So there are people like this in the world. And this is a big warning, this play, Faustus. If you haven't seen it or read it, I recommend you do. Anyway. It is one thing for Satan or Mephistopheles to trick people into falling into his traps. It is another to get them to sign away their soul voluntarily. However, such a contract is required if he wants to truly make them his own. So, yeah, it might start out as a bit of a joke. Oh, let's go and join the Church of Satan. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Have a tattoo on my arm, stick it to those good Christians. That's how it probably happens a lot. And then once they've done this, they've set up a contract with Satan. And that's very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. I'm not saying you can't be saved, but it's going to be hard on you. This, I believe, is why many violent and hypersexualized movies are put on television, why pornography is rampant on the internet, and why the Olympic Committee goes out of its way to allow trans boxers to compete in women's events. It's all designed to blunt our consciousness, our natural morality. People do have a natural morality, but it gets worn down and blunted. We lose common sense, we lose sight of what is actually disgusting and should not be allowed, what is a proper, normal, moral life. So these things get blunted, and then the borderline, becomes easier to transgress. So the intention is to blunt the public sense of the borderline between right and wrong. The devil is far smarter than any human on their own and knows how to play on our weaknesses. Oh, yes, you bet he does, and he knows your weaknesses. You've heard it said you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Well, there's a certain amount of truth in that, because you're being tempted all the time to do things that you shouldn't. But the more you fall into that trap, the more you get, into the habit of doing whatever it is. You become maybe an habitual liar, or you habitually turn up at work late, and you're a habitual thief, maybe stealing little things from shops, and then it gets to be bigger things. You cheat on your wife. First time it's this is only a one-off, with the secretary, but later it becomes a habit, and eventually maybe she divorces you. This is the sort of things that happen in life. So following a moral life is not that easy. Once you slip down the helter-skelter, you've got to climb up those stairs again. Maybe there is some reason for putting that in the church there, to warn people about this. You slide down and you've got to go up. And it's harder work going up, isn't it? So this is what we're up against. So once we've become addicted to one or another sin, it is much easier to persuade us to sell our very soul in return for easy gratification. This is why we see an epidemic of drug misuse, addiction to perverted sex, gambling, drinking, lying, cheating, and abuse of power. Without restraint, these lead us to making pacts with the devil. It must be a coincidence. I'm sure it's an absolute coincidence. But doesn't that statue, that image, I found it on the internet, look a lot like Tony Blair? It's a total coincidence. Anyway, meanwhile, the Paris Olympics, this festival supposedly of sport, people have been working their hearts out, learning or practicing running, jumping, swimming, boxing, riding horses, whatever. They've worked really, really hard. But we had a very, very strange opening scene for the thing. There was a parade down the Seine, or up the Seine, where they were showing us different montages along the banks. And there's some horrible sights, things like Marie Antoinette with her head chopped off, and she's holding the head and it's singing. I mean, what's that got to do with sport? Blunting our sensitivity. Anyway, there was this figure, there was this montage, a takeoff of the Last Supper, and don't tell me it wasn't, because it very definitely is. Anyone with any common sense can see that, and I think they even admitted it. So it's mocking the figure of Jesus. The figure of Jesus, one in the middle, and you see that fat lady there with a sort of sunburst behind her head. She's in the position where Jesus would be with a halo in the original. And she's a self-confessed lesbian, and she's very fat. Actually, I think all these people here, or most of them anyway, were some kind of trans or bi or whatever. I don't get all these LGBT things these days. This rainbow of sexualities. But that, why would you parade that in a montage representing the Last Supper? The Last Supper was a very sacred thing to Christians. But again, it's blunting sensitivities. And to make it even worse, they had this figure representing Dionysus, or in Greek, Bacchus in Latin, who's the god of drink and debauchery. He's the god of a good time. Tomorrow you might regret it, but have a good time now. That's got nothing to do with the Last Supper either. And I don't think it's got much to do with the actual athletics competition that this was opening. Has it? I can't imagine it has. But there it was, for all of us to see. And so you can see here, this is again from Rochester Cathedral, a lovely sculpture of the Last Supper. I thought it was delightful on the high altar. Why did they do this bacchanalian version? Well, I think one reason was so that every time you look at one of these montages now, like this altarpiece, or if you see the famous Leonardo painting, which is even more like the Olympic one, you're going to bring to mind, oh, there was that Olympic thing, wasn't there, that looked like that. It's going to ruin your appreciation of this event, or the high art of the event. It's always going to be there. They've coarsened your appreciation. And this has been done deliberately. This is a typical satanic thing, to deliberately ruin your appreciation of the beautiful and coarsen it down to something that is despicable. And that's what they've done with this. But it doesn't stop there. Now, at the end, there was the closing ceremony. And in the closing ceremony, there was another ritual. First, a figure they called the Golden Voyager was lowered to the stage. Oh, who is this Golden Voyager? Insect-like and dressed in a dark suit with light-form wings and sparkles, he clearly represented a fallen angel coming to earth. Now, when angels come to earth, very often they're symbolized as lights or stars that come down to earth. That's one of the main meanings of the star of Bethlehem over the stable. It's the soul of Jesus coming into birth, is one of the interpretations of that. For reasons that I shall explain, I believe this Golden Voyager, was intended to represent the ancient Greek god Apollo. Now, I'm going to explain why I say that, and you'll be quite shocked. Now, the Golden Voyager then encounters the statue of a headless angel. Now, why a headless angel? Huh? Why? She seems to represent the decapitation of the spiritual aspect of our current civilization of Christianity. In other words, this is an attack, direct attack on Christianity, having its head cut off. Who wants to cut off heads of people? There's another religion that does that, isn't there? I'm not going to even mention its name. But this is symbolic of people being persecuted and persecution of the church. It seems like he is taunting Christians, that's the golden voyager, with an image that says they no longer have power of thought and action. He is taking over and will resurrect the ancient pagan religion of Greece. Why do I say that? Now, other zombies, zombie-like figures, are resurrected out of the mist. Under the direction of the golden voyager, they find 5 large rings. They hoist these into the air to make the 5-ring symbol of the Olympics. You know, the Olympic Games have 5 rings joined together, representing 5 continents competing in the sport. So these people are resurrecting the 5 rings of the Olympics and putting them in the air. So we've got symbols to do with the death of Christianity, the beheading of the angel. It's just left there as a statue, it's dead. And the resurrection of the Olympic ideal. And what's that all about? Finally, the actor Tom Cruise skydives into the arena to collect the Olympic flag. He leaves the stadium on a motorcycle to take the flag back to Los Angeles, the location for the next Olympic Games in 2028. So that seems simple enough. Yeah, they always pass on the flag to the next one. So, yeah, well, but maybe a little bit more to that. We'll talk about that in a minute. The key to understanding this curious event is the identity of the golden voyager as the ancient Greek god Apollo. He is generally thought of as a solar deity, but really he isn't. He's not a solar deity, really. The Greek sun god was Helios, yeah? Helios, the sun god. This Apollo attribution was a later thing that sort of sneaked its way in and merged with Helios in the Greek pantheon. Apollo is really another name for Lucifer, the fallen angel of Hebrew and Christian teachings, who brought about the fall of man. Why do I say that? Well, let's see. In Greece, his main temple was at Delphi, and the flame of the Olympic torch is today lit at this temple. It's a very the temple of Apollo is where they light the flame. And you know, then they carry it, people run with it, people go on aeroplanes with it, whatever it takes. Then they take it has to go around the world, doesn't it? And then they take it finally to its destination for the next Olympic Games, and they light that big flame in the Olympics. So they turn that stadium into a temple of Apollo, linked by the flame brought to it, and they light that flame using sunlight. So it's a pagan ritual, actually, that is what you see, and it's a ritual dedicated to Apollo. Where does this go? Apollo had his oracle at Delphi, which pilgrims would visit in order to get their fortune told. Priestesses would sit below ground inhaling fumes from the earth that put them into a trance state. The god would then speak through them. So he's to do with fortune telling. Underground, priestesses are drugged out by the smoke coming, the fumes coming up from the earth, and people who go there to get their fortune told. And there's some famous stories about that, particularly the king of, was it Lydia? No, it's the other one, wasn't it? Phrygia went there and wanted to know if he should attack the Persian Empire, which was growing, and he could see that there was going to be a fight, sooner or later, and he wanted to know if he would win. And the priestess said to him, if you attack, a great kingdom will fall. And he thought, oh, that's great. She said, I'm going to win. But of course, he led his army out, and they were defeated, and he was taken prisoner, and it was his kingdom that fell. So what these priestesses would say was very ambivalent, and everything about Apollo is ambivalent. Apollo was a trickster figure and full of contradictions. He was a god of light, but also of dark, gloomy places. He was a god of reason. Supposedly he's the god to do with logic and science and enlightenment. But he's also the prophet, a god of prophets and forecasts and priestesses in dark pits telling you lies, basically, and confusing you and deceiving you. He brought about sickness, but he also brought about health. That's a contradiction, isn't it? In other words, he was all that we associate with Lucifer, the light bearer, trickster of the Bible. The Olympic Games were and are his celebration. That's what the symbolism is telling us. The cult of Apollo was brought to Greece from Anatolia, where he was known as Apollyon. The key to understanding the image of the Golden Voyager is the last book of the Bible, the Apocalypse or Revelation of St. John. Now, I did tell you at the beginning we're going to talk about the Apocalypse. In chapter 9, we're told that when the fifth angel, 7 angels are going to blow their trumpet, and horrible things happen, mostly horrible, when these angels blow their trumpets. And when this fifth angel blows his trumpet, a star falls from heaven. That means an angel or some kind of high being is coming down to earth, fell from heaven. This is a fallen angel, and he has the key to open the bottomless pit. Oh, he's going to open the bottomless pit. And smoke comes out, darkening the sun. Ah, right. Well, at this performance, we had smoke on the stage, and out of the smoke, in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, it says, out of the smoke emerged locusts, which have the power of scorpions. They look like horses, but have human hair and teeth, like lions. Armoured, they have stings in their tails. Well, that's a very weird thing, isn't it? Are we talking about some kind of drones? We would understand drones now, wouldn't we? We would understand drones, if that's what it's talking about. Armed drones that come and attack you, come out of smoke. St. John wouldn't know anything about that, would he? He's talking about in terms of things that can gallop along and have hair and teeth like lions. He's trying to put it into terms that people of his time could understand. Now, the angel of the bottomless pit is their king. So we're told that in the Bible. And his name in Hebrew is Abaddon, which translates into Greek as Apollyon. And both names mean destroyer. So Apollo is the destroyer. He's Abaddon. So Abaddon the destroyer is, he's the king of the pit. And he's the star that's fallen out of the sky. And we've just seen this golden figure coming down from the heaven. So it's not hard to see that the locust-like golden Voyager, remember he looks a bit like an insect, and he's got these tentacles coming up out of his head. You can see it there, just like a locust would have. Incidentally, my little thing here is not a locust, it's a grasshopper, and it's to do with Gresham College, but that's another story. So this is the king of the locusts, and he falls like a star out of the sky, raises an army of zombies, and we see this in the performance that they do. These kind of zombie-like people come out of the smoke, and together they resurrect the symbol of the Olympic Games. So these zombie-like people come out and they raise these big rings which get hoisted up and make the symbol of the Olympics. which is going to transfer now to Los Angeles for the next one. A second Voyager, well, can I call him that? He came down out of the sky, was Tom Cruise. And he descended to pick up the flag of the Olympics and take it back to Hollywood. Now, he was dressed normally, nothing weird there. But Tom Cruise is, of course, the most prominent member of the Scientology sect, which has its headquarters in Los Angeles. So I don't know if there's any connection there, probably not. But it is a curious coincidence, isn't it? Synchronicity, you could say, that the Scientology sect has their headquarters in Los Angeles, and he's the most prominent member of it, and he comes to collect the flag of the Olympics, which is the Apollo thing going on, and take it to Los Angeles for the next Olympics. Well, make of it what you want. The symbol is all there if you have the eyes to read it. Now then, we're going to move a bit further into the book of Revelation, and we're going to see how this is impinging on our own times even more. So in chapter 12, it says, and I'm going to read it out to you here, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 7 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth." So this woman is pregnant. "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth." Remember what I was saying about the stars representing angels or beings, casting them down to earth. That's bringing down these angels, fallen angels, with him as he comes down to earth. "And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So that's what it says in chapter 12 of the Revelation. Now let's dissect the imagery here. The baby who will one day rule all nations with a rod of iron is Jesus Christ. He's actually described as having a rod of iron and ruling the nations in the Revelation, so we know it's him. The woman who gives birth to him symbolizes several things, or can do. On the one hand, she can be interpreted as his mother Mary, but why would you interpret Mother Mary as being pursued by the dragon? It doesn't make any sense, does it? At a cosmic level, she is planet Earth, which is the greater mother of us all. You can say that the Earth is the mother of everyone, including Jesus. And curiously, it's a planet of oceans, and in Latin, the ocean is called mare. So the planet is mare. The sea is a mare. The blue planet full of water. Most of it is water, isn't it? So the Earth is robed in sunlight. Sunlight comes around it, doesn't it? And the moon is at her feet. So you could say it's planet Earth. But that's not the real interpretation, or it's only one interpretation. The third and most important level prophetically is that she represents the nation of Israel. Now, you must be clear about this. By this I don't mean the Jewish nation, that's what we call Israel today, but all of Israel, which had 12 tribes, most of whom were not Jewish. The Jews are descended from the tribe of Judah. They've got other converts as well, but the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin were the two tribes that made up the tribe of the kingdom of Judah. The other 10 tribes went in the northern kingdom, which was called Israel. It was split in two after the time of King Solomon. You can read all about that in the book of Kings. So the woman represents Israel as a whole, and she's given birth. Israel has given birth to the Messiah, Jesus, and he's swept up to heaven before the devil can consume him. He's gone to the throne of God. That's what Christians believe. But he's going to come back. Meanwhile, the woman is taken away into the wilderness. So the majority of Israelites, so coming back to this Israel thing, the majority of Israelites were transported from the Holy Land by the Assyrians between 734 to 722 BC. So I've done programs about this, and I've got another one yet to do, or probably a couple more actually. Most of the Jews too, that's from the kingdom of Judah, not the kingdom of Israel or Samaria, which was the northern kingdom. Most of the Jews too, those not living in Jerusalem itself, were also transported from Judea. So you can actually go into the British Museum, and you see these great Assyrian slabs on the walls in the Assyrian galleries, and one of those is of the siege of a particular city in Judea. And actually the Assyrians did take all the cities and towns of Judea, and they transported those people away, except for Jerusalem. They didn't get Jerusalem, they fell sick. The Jews in Jerusalem were protected by an angel. That's what it tells us. So anyway, so what happened to all those Israelites? And there were millions of them, you know. It's quite a big, powerful kingdom. It wasn't an empty desert as it became later. Where are they now, those lost tribes? Well, without going into details today, the answer is very simple. Over a period of a few centuries, they moved into Europe, and most especially into Britain. I don't say it's only Britain, but something very important happened in Britain, and I'll tell you about that another time. From there, they went to other places. They dispersed out to the rest of the world, didn't they? Founded countries like the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, other ones from going from Portugal to Brazil, and from Spain to its colonies, France to its colonies. There were, this whole effort, and that was done by Europeans, and the Europeans at that time were Christians, and they took the Christian religion with them, took the Bible with them, converted the people to Christianity. So it's a very important thing, but you have to understand that the lost tribes were the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which Jesus talks about, that he came not for the people of the Jews, he came for the lost tribes of the house of Israel. The Jews weren't lost. Everyone knew who they were, but he knew very well that his word and the religion would take root among the lost tribes who were in Europe, and that's indeed became the centre of Christianity. Even after the Middle East and Africa and so on were conquered by Islam, and Christianity was reduced to a rump, it survived in Europe and prospered, and that was the place it was sent to. After this is carrying on with the story in the chapter 12, after this there's war in heaven, and Michael, the archangel, defeats the dragon and throws him down to earth, and his angels with him. So this is seven-headed dragon. He comes thundering down to earth, cast down by Michael. And it goes on. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness. What's that all about? Well, I put it to you, think on this. The symbol of the USA is the bald-headed eagle with wings outstretched. It would appear that the wings of the eagle refers to America. Pursued by the dragon, the woman, Israel, 12-tribe Israel, finds sanctuary there in the vastness of America's wilderness. Note that the USA is the strongest ally of the country now called Israel. Yeah. So you've got the 12 tribes of Israel in Europe, but also in America. And you've got the remnant of the 2-tribe Judah in what they call Israel, but I think should actually be called Judah or Judea at the moment. Also, twice America has come to the aid of Europe, and especially Britain, at their hour of greatest need, in World War I and again in World War II. So this is very, very significant. That's why the devil, he absolutely hates Europeans, and he hates Americans. And that's why we're having all this attack, all this anti-white rhetoric, all this diversity demand, trying to obliterate the white Christian nations. It's why that's going on. It's being pushed by this dragon who doesn't want, he's trying to destroy them before the return of Jesus Christ. It's not going to happen, but that's what is being attempted. And that's why you're seeing all this. You're seeing the corruption. You're seeing the politicians who can't manage things. They're making a complete hash of everything. In Britain, we're having all sorts of troubles, but I won't go into those. You know what I'm talking about. But we're having a lot of trouble too. And in Europe. And so it goes on. But this is all going to pass. This is all part of the difficult times, the times of the beast that we've been warned about in the book of Revelation. 1,260 days is 3.5 prophetic years of 360 days each. Yes, prophetic years of 360 days. You get that from places like the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. You can think of that as being perfect days, years. So that's what the numbers are. So it's 3.5 years, time, times, and half a time. This is the period during which the beast with the number 666 rules over the earth. Now, I've told you in another lecture that 666 refers to the time of King Solomon when he was being exceptionally greedy. And that was the amount of gold that he was getting, gold bars each year as tax. He was taxing the people very, very hard. It symbolises greed and perhaps banking and those who are controlling the money supply. So that's what the number of the beast is all about. And taking the number of the beast is going to be something to do with that, because you cannot buy or sell without having the number of the beast, 666. So what's that all about? Well, it could be something quite hard for us during this interim period. So 3.5 years is the second half of a 7-year period. It's also nearly a full term between presidential elections. I just float that in there for you to think about. Perhaps the vastness of America will protect a core remnant of the woman's descendants, the Israelites. The chapter carries on. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river which the dragon had poured from his mouth. Well, that's a very, very odd prophecy, isn't it? What could that possibly mean as well? Well, in the Bible, and especially in the Revelation, water represents nations and peoples. So when you see a beast rising out of the water, it means it's coming out of the nations. It's not talking about actual water, it's talking about the rising of different nations at different times. So the flood here could symbolize the incredible flood of immigrants from everywhere that are currently pouring into America. And it says the earth will swallow the water. Could this mean something? Perhaps an earthquake or volcanic eruption in Mexico is going to deter even more people going to the border. It certainly seems like something of that sort is implied. And as I read that, I'm just reminded that there seems to be a volcano about to erupt in Italy. People have been going on about this, and even worse than Mount Vesuvius, which was pretty awful. But there's this giant super volcano in southern Italy near Naples, throwing out smoke and ash and smells, and it's never been so active in living memory. People are very, very worried now that this thing is going to blow. And if it does, it could cause a nuclear winter, black out the sky for years on end. Catastrophic. I mean, I don't want to be a fearmonger. I'm only quoting second-hand reports. I haven't been to that part of Italy. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But I think maybe that's going to also halt all this migration into Europe. I put it to you, maybe. So it could happen in Mexico. They've got lots of volcanoes there. And it's also, quite you get earthquakes in that region. Meanwhile, what about Britain and Europe at this time? The prophecy continues. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and bear testimony to Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So he hasn't managed to dislodge or destroy Israel in America, if that's the bit that's flown away with the eagle's wings. Coming back to make war on the rest of our offspring, I think that means Europe. This seems to relate to the fierce attack at present on European culture, especially white people in the Christian religion. It has to be said, it's happening here. This has blown up in a remarkably short time and seemingly from nowhere. Without consulting anyone, the European Union opened its borders to mass migration. That was in 2015. Angela Merkel did it. This has had a disastrous effect on many countries, including Italy, Germany, France, Netherlands, Sweden, and England, to name but a few. Suddenly, what were safe countries for Christians have become contested space as other groups make claims of their own on the lands. Many cities are now majority immigrant. Again, you probably heard about this, but London is now a majority immigrant city. It's quite shocking when you go up there. And so are a number of other cities in England. And the same thing's happening in Amsterdam and in other places in Europe. Certainly parts of cities and even whole cities are now out of touch civilizationally with the parent country in which they exist. It's very, very odd. Never happened before, but it is happening now. At the same time, Israel, which should really be called Judah or Judea, that's my opinion, has come under renewed attack. The war with Hamas in Gaza is clearly only the prelude to a much larger war between Israel and the combined forces of the Islamic world. Well, it's happened before, isn't it? But it's going to be a bit different in the days of cruise missiles and rockets and all sorts of other stuff, drones, and the rest of it. It's going to be a bit different. This massive invasion intended to wipe out the Jewish state in its entirety is prophesied in detail in Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. It talks there, you can read those chapters, I'm not going to go into it here, but it talks in those chapters about a massive invasion of Israel from the north, led by someone called Gog and Magog. And for very good reasons, I believe that Gog and Magog refers to Turkey, not Russia, as some people think, but Turkey. And Turkey is becoming more and more extreme in its. It used to be quite a secular state. It's not now, not under President Erdogan. It's moving, but that's another story. Meanwhile, the European Union, the joining together of 27 countries in an attempt to rival the United States, Russia and China as a superpower, is clearly influenced by covert, if not overt, Satanism. Why do I say that? Well, this is shown most clearly in the Parliament building at Strasbourg. At first sight, it looks unfinished. You know, you look at that building and think, well, why haven't they built the top story properly? What's going on here? At first sight, it looks unfinished, but this is by intent. In fact, the building is supposed to represent the Tower of Babel. And I'm not making that up. You can see it on their own poster. There's the Tower of Babel, and there's the European Union stars over the top. It says, Europe, many tongues, one voice. And in Genesis, the Tower of Babel is an attempt to build a structure high enough to enable mankind to reach heaven. And it's actually, the reaching heaven is not, they're not trying to build a tower so tall it can go to the moon. What that's talking about is building their civilization in such a way and using their intelligence and their science to assault heaven. And we're doing that now, aren't we? With spaceships and so on, and the massive spaceships that Elon Musk is building, Starship. He's actually got a capsules that go up to the space station called Dragon. I quite like Elon Musk, but it is curious the symbolism that's coming through as well. To thwart this attempt, God confuses their language. That's in the Tower of Babel. Unable to understand one another, the tribes disperse to different parts of the world. So that's the story that you get in the Bible. The European Union seeks to unite countries and give them one voice. It says so here. Europe, many tongues, one voice. Ironically, the only language that is practical for their purposes is English, while Britain itself has left the EU. And the largest English-speaking country is the US, which is the rival, in a sense, of the EU. Notice also the downward pointing stars in this poster. Look at them. Downward pointing stars like that are goat's heads, and they're symbols of Satan. Turning it like an upside down cross, an upside down five-pointed star is a satanic symbol. And that seems to be actually on this poster. Another favoured image of the EU is the story of the abduction of Europa by Zeus in the form of a bull. Zeus was the king of the gods in Greece. And in the story, Zeus wants to have his way with a young woman on a beach in Lebanon. She's a bit nervous and he has to be a bit careful, so he makes himself into a white bull, very docile, calm, nice, friendly bull. And she goes over and it doesn't attack her, it's not nasty. She's able to stroke his nose, and eventually she feels confident enough to get up on his back. So, to win her trust, he pretends to be very friendly and docile. And once she's got used to this, he invites her to get up on his back. Once she's riding him, he gallops off into the sea. So they're on the beach and straight into the sea. Well, now she's got to hang on or she's going to drown. She now has no choice but to hang on tightly. He takes her to Crete, where he rapes her. Mythologically, this is the start of the Minoan culture, the first European civilization. I know as supposedly the first civilization in Europe. I don't necessarily believe that, but that's what the archaeologists say and what the tradition is. The rape of Europe is clearly the forecast of what the European Union is all about. The destruction of the current arrangement of Christian countries into a single bloc, united by language and following a new religion based on something else. To get there, the fathers of the EU had to lie, saying that first the EEC, that's the European Economic Community, and later the EU, the European Union, was not a threat to sovereignty. It was just good business and was also the best way of preventing another European war. And they still say this, well, we prevented another war between France and Germany. Well, actually they haven't. It's NATO that's done that. It stopped an invasion from Russia and kept the lid on everything. I don't think the European Union has done anything to help that. And what about the flag of the EU? Yeah, there it is. This one has got the upside down stars again. I think it can be either way up. They don't seem to worry too much about how they fly it. Well, this again is an inversion of Christian symbolism, and in particular of the symbolism of the book of Revelation. There, the 12 stars represent the 12 tribes of Israel around the head of Israel as the mother of Jesus Christ. That's what the symbolism is in the book of Revelation. Here, the 12 stars are pentagrams, sometimes inverted, and therefore symbolizing the domain of the devil. The stars, or tribes, are to be brought together into a new union without any reference to their mother, Israel, and without any allusion of her giving birth to the Messiah. It is to be a political and social alliance with no regard to Jesus Christ or the mission of Israel. So it's a pagan symbol. It's a pagan takeover of the tribes of Israel in Europe to make them into this pagan state based on this Apollo worship maybe, or the Zeus carrying off Europa worship, those sort of themes, but essentially pagan. They don't really believe in the soul at all, and they don't have any kind of prayers in the parliament. They banned it. Standing against it, that's against the European Union, is the throne of Great Britain, ancient in itself and containing what is reportedly the throne stone of ancient Israel. This stone, or so they say, will one day be taken back to Jerusalem, where Jesus as Messiah will sit on it as he judges the nations. So this stone is actually it's actually in Scotland at the moment, but it's put it back into the throne each time they have a coronation. They put it back there for the coronation of King Charles. It used to be in that throne all the time in Westminster Abbey, but because of John Major, former Prime Minister, he sent it back to Scotland, where it had been prior to coming to London. So is this true? Well, there is good evidence that this stone is far from ordinary. It may even have been taken from Egypt by Moses. Yeah, I got good reasons for saying that, and I'll tell you that in another lecture. You'll love it when I explain the whole thing about this stone and what this mystery really is. But this will all have to wait for another time. So this stone, and if you read the prophecies of Daniel, I told you about the book of Daniel, and I've done 3 lectures on it. You can watch those. There's a big statue of a series of world empires going down, beginning with the Babylonian Empire and going down through the empires. And eventually a stone comes along and smashes the feet of this statue and it crashes down. I believe that's referring to this stone. It's actually the stone of Israel is actually what's going to undo the statue and destroy the beast and the beast kingdom that is being established at the moment. So that's all I have for you today, my friends, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't waffle too much. If you like what I do, there's lots of other free lectures on YouTube. If you want to know more and you want to take part in the Invisible College itself, I am actually training people. I'm giving them extra lectures that you won't get in the public sphere. You can come along to that on patreon.com, Adrian G. Gilbert. I think that's right. And thank you again. And please give us a like and follow the channel. There we go. Bye-bye for now.